Our first speaker today will be Rachel Patterson from Kindai University. And yeah, quick round of applause. And she is going to present Corporate Climb, the business English board game, as part of the Materials Writer SIG. And so we'll have a fascinating activity from her, and then we'll aim to have a 5-minute break. And then we will hear from James Dunn of Meiji University, and he is representing Critical Thinking SIG. And his talk will be Extending Critical Thinking Past the Text, Strategies for Creating Supplemental Printouts that Focus on Students' Needs. So again, we're starting with Rachel, so I will let Rachel start.
Thanks, Victoria. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this presentation. My name is Rachel Patterson. I am with Kindai University in the Faculty of International Studies, and a special thank you to the Material Writer SIG and the Q-SIG for allowing me this opportunity. So I'm just going to jump right in and share my screen. I have a presentation that I'll go through and kind of go through the basics of how this activity works. Okay, so this is Corporate Climb. This is the business English board game, and I'll go through the overview about why I did this. I'll also talk about what the students need to play. We'll talk about the rules, how much time the activity takes, and what were the results. So starting kind of just with some background information of why I did this. I'm just, as a little bit of background, again, I'm with the Faculty of International Studies at Kindai University, and I focus mainly on the study abroad program. We have a global studies program here. We get about 500 students every year, and they join the study abroad program. And in their first year, they study abroad for 2 semesters in North America. And then after that, they return back to Japan, and then they complete some other coursework. And this coursework includes business English courses, and they also complete some soft skills courses as well in their second and third years. The business courses are about 33 different class groups. Each group is about 12 to 15 students, and in my case, I teach 3 of those 33 groups. And on the CEFR scale, they range anywhere between A2 to B2 plus level. And during my coursework, I just noticed a few things. One thing I noticed in the courses, just to give you some background about the course itself, the class itself meets once per week for 15 weeks. A total of 13 weeks of instruction and 2 weeks of review with a final exam in week 16. And the other review activities that other instructors were doing, they were very teacher-centered, and they were relying on IRF, or initiation response feedback, which is basically, you know, as you all know, the teacher stands in front of the class, asks the students a question, and then the students can respond or, you know, not respond based on what they know. So teacher would ask, who can give me an example of qualitative market research? And the students either answer or they don't, and then, you know, you review that point. Other methods were very overly student independent. In other words, the teacher says, okay, review the chapters on your own in pairs, make notes about what you don't remember, and then whatever you don't remember, you can study on your own, or they may talk about in class. And unfortunately, this left a lot of students feeling either bored or very confused, or in some cases both, which for me was not an effective method of learning, checking the students' learning, or preparing them for the final exam or any other situations that they needed outside of class. So on a whim, I was talking to one of my colleagues, and he was telling me about a board game cafe that he had recently been to. He had a lot of fun. So I figured, why not do that for the students? And I wanted to try and incorporate board games into the classroom activity for review. And so I created this activity called Corporate Climb. And so I decided to try and use some of a conversation from a colleague to create a board game that helps students retain what they learn, review what they learn, but also allows me as the instructor to take a step back and just, you know, examine and evaluate how the students really did over the course of the semester. And so what I did was I found a website called Idu Stoya, which has a lot of copyright-free images, which are really nice and easy to understand. And I took some of those images and kind of crafted them into this board game. So if you notice, the office building is a board. It's the actual game board itself. And I've used the office windows. There are small numbers in each corner that are the game spaces. And so students start as an entry-level employee, which again relates to the content of the course, that they're using business English, they're using formal English in a business setting. And they have to use the language that they've studied to complete various challenges as they go through the board. And they have to reach the corner office first, or where the president's office is. And so that kind of gives them the motivation to kind of race to the top. And so there are some rules to the game, and there are a couple of other materials that students need to play, which I'll go over very shortly. The game is about 3 or more players, and they need dice. And if you don't have dice, then I find that dice.io, it's an app, it's a free app that works really well. You can use it on your smartphone, PC, or tablet. And the students also need a timer. Usually I assign one student in the group to be the timekeeper. They open up their smartphone and they use the timer app on their phone. And some game pieces or tokens. And these can be something as simple as erasers or 1 yen coins or little, cutout pieces of paper. You can use any kind of game token. And then one student is kind of the checker. They have the textbook open for checking answers. And they also come with a set of game cards that I've created. The game cards there's 6 game card types in total. And the game cards range from situations all the way to like sending and writing emails. For example, there's 1-minute speech in which the student pulls a card, they get a topic, and then they have 1 minute to talk about the topic nonstop. So for example, there is no job security because of AI. Do you agree or disagree? To what extent? And the student would then have 1 minute to talk without nonstop and give their opinion. The reason why I chose these cards are all taken from the content of the course. So for example, job security, when we first introduced the phrase job security to students, a lot of students think, oh, like a security guard or a security officer. And then we go through, no, job security has a different meaning and has a different meaning than the context they might presume. So we use the terms and the language to have them not only just act out role plays or other situations they might face in a day-to-day situation, but also to give their opinions and to expand on topics that will affect them in general. So there's 1-minute speech cards. There's also email cards. For example, there's a prompt on the card and they have to read the prompt and then draft an email on a whiteboard. We have small whiteboards here in the classroom, and the students will then get a marker and a whiteboard, and they have 1 minute to draft an email related to the prompt. We've covered this topic in class. It's presumed that the students know how to read an email or read a prompt and then write the header, the beginning, the body, and the closing. And then they have to effectively answer the email prompt. The other players during the game will read the email and then vote if the email is appropriate or not. And so we use these kinds of techniques and we use these kinds of situations to play the game. There are other types of cards as well. For example, there's action card. For example, you closed a big business deal, move forward 3 spaces. There's managerial decision, where you can move another player back to start, which really gets the game exciting and gets the students really just riled up. And there's also situation cards, where they are given a particular situation and then they have to respond using some of the key phrases that we've covered in class. For example, you're meeting with a business client and the client asks, well, why should we work with your company over the other competitors? And the student has to give a response using as far as price is concerned or as far as quality is concerned, et cetera, et cetera. So they have to use some phrases that they've covered so far successfully to express themselves. And the reason why I wanted to kind of give them their key phrases and prompts is to, one, kind of just give them a little bit of a hint, because we cover so much in the course. But the other reason is when they study abroad in the US, they hang out with mostly people their own age. And so they pick up English phrases that are really great for making friends and are really good in casual and informal social situations. But they come back and they're not very good, or they tend to lack language that helps them in the business world. They tend to lack more formal language. And so this course and this game kind of tie all that together to really push them to fluently use and build on what they've already learned in the US, while incorporating new, more formal language and phrases they might not be familiar with. So next, I show this slide to the students. After I've distributed the materials, I showed this the rules slide to them. They get the game board, they get the materials, and then they have to decide in their group who will go first. They can rock, paper, scissors. They can choose whoever goes first. And then everybody begins at start, and that's at the bottom of the company, right at the, at the doors. And they roll the dice, they move the correct number of spaces, and they pick up a game card and follow the instructions. So all of the game cards are face down. They all have the same back on them, the same logo on the back, and they can't see what the card is until they pick it up. So they pick up the game card, they have to follow the instructions. If they can't complete the instructions, they can't move forward. So let's say they land on space number 4, they pick up a situation card, they don't say the situation phrase correctly, they have to go back to start, or they have to go back to where they originally started from. If they can do the situations successfully, then they can stay. So that's, and that keeps the game propelling and keeps the game moving forward. And then they get the different card types. Again, they have situation cards, complete the situation and use the keywords. 1 minute speech, speak for about 1 minute, minimum. If they stop for more than 10 seconds, then they're out. They can't move forward. They have action cards that affects the player, and managerial cards where they can affect another player. They can move another player forward. They can move another player back. There's You've Got Mail, where they read an email and they have to explain or summarize what the email is, who is the email for, and what will most likely happen next. Or send an email, and that's what I explained earlier, where they have to draft an email and then the players vote if the email is appropriate or not. So now that they've got the materials, they've got the players, they've got the board game and the cards, then they get into groups and they play. So while the students are playing, they usually, it's very self-sufficient, very self-sustained. So once they start, I can set it and let go and just walk around and observe. So, I'll overhear conversations, I'll overhear the students making phrases, making sentences, reviewing the language. And the students will, in fact, hold each other accountable and make sure that they're saying things correctly, making sure that the phrases were used, making sure that the grammar is correct. And when they get really competitive, they get really picky about making sure everything was done properly. So the students will also, if they are not sure and they can't find the answer in the book, they will ask me to come over and just verify, and I can, approve or veto whatever answer the student gives. And this activity can go on for quite some time because of the dynamic of the way that the game is made. So the game, after the game is finished, students will then get into groups, and then they have to think about which phrases, which grammar structures, which expressions they couldn't quite remember, or the parts of the units that they couldn't quite, that they had trouble with. And they write those collectively on the whiteboards in class. So they might say like, oh, I didn't quite remember quantitative and qualitative research. Oh, I didn't quite remember the phrase find time to. I don't know how to use it in a sentence well. Or how do I use I'd appreciate it if in an email well? Like, how do I say that? So then they write it together on the board, and then other groups can come in and say, oh, this is how you do it, or this is how you correctly use this grammar, or this is how you use this phrase. And if the class is still stumped, then we review it together. We go back in the textbook and we do a shorter review activity as a group. That allows me to pinpoint areas that they definitely have trouble with, while allowing the students to take more ownership of their own review and their own learning, essentially. And so how much time does this take in total? The activity itself takes about 10 minutes to set up, getting the paper and the cards and the materials distributed. A little bit less, depending on how many students I have in the class. If I have fewer students, less time to distribute. More students takes more time. And then the students will play for roughly 60 minutes or so. And then after they play, they write their answers on the board, or they write the trouble phrases on the board. And then we do a collective review for about 15 to 20 minutes, which is about a 90-minute class. And that's the total review class as well. And when I made the game, I used a combination of Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word, and Idustoya.com for the game materials. Microsoft Excel, I typed in all of the card types in one column. I put the tasks in a second column. Email prompts were in a third column, for example. And then I used a combination of Microsoft Excel and then mail merge to create, and tables and Word to create the game cards. So once I did the mail merge, it filled all of the card information out. So I didn't have to like type all of the cards individually on the Microsoft document. It just filled in everything automatically. And then I could just print and cut. And the initial game creation itself took about 2 hours of prep time, I want to say, but it was really successful in class. It was very well received. It took off really fast. Students didn't take a long time to figure out how to play or what to do. I used it across all 3 of my class groups. So that was one prep for 3 90-minute periods. So that was a really good return on time invested. And then I was able to share this activity with fellow instructors who also came back and said, Rachel, your activity was really fun. My students enjoyed it. My students had a good time playing the game, and I had to do very little, which I'm always happy to help teachers. If it makes it easier for them to do their job, then I feel, like I contributed something. And the templates that I created for the cards themselves, the templates that I created for the actual game, I can reuse in another way. So I can just go back and refill in different card types or refill in different activities and use it for a different class for a different purpose. And the prep takes even less time. And the results of the final exam it was still a tough final exam. It was quite difficult for the students, I will say. But my group, the groups that I taught, and I don't have the other averages for the other classes. I don't know the exact numbers for the other groups, but I do know my class, and I know the total entire group average for the final exam. And my classes came out higher than average, higher than the average of the entire groups. So I can't say for exact certainty that this activity was a key factor in them doing better than the other groups on the final exam. But I'd like to think it did. But overall, I did feel that the activity really did help students more than if I just did a simple like initiation response, or if I asked the students to just do it on their own. And all of the students were engaged. All of the students got to build and build rapport better as well. And I felt that the activity really had a positive reception overall. So this is basically a corporate climb. The students found it more relevant. They found it fun and engaging, and therefore it was more memorable. And it was production focused and student centered. So I could kind of sit back and just kind of do evaluations on their speaking, on their fluency, on their grammar. And it helped students review and prepare for the final assessment, using kind of a self-assessment as well. So the students got their own textbook and kind of checked each other, and then kind of checked themselves as well. Overall, I felt like the activity was pretty well designed, but I'm still working on it. There's still areas that I need to work out, like the types of situations, the way that the cards are written. There are a lot of things that I'm still tweaking. So it's not necessarily a finished product, but it's still in the works. That's basically it. I'm happy to welcome any questions you may have, and any comments or any feedback. Thank you. Okay, John, I think your hand was raised.
And fast. Okay, just a quick question. I may have missed this. I was kind of in and out of concentrating on what you were saying. Was this a physical game that you printed out on paper that they played, like it's an actual board game, or was this an online? Yeah.
This was a physical paper board game. So the board game itself, the actual building board is on an A3 size paper. And then the cards are printed on A4 paper in a table format. And then the way that the table is made, I can cut, and I can usually just take a paper cutter and cut very quickly along the lines with maybe 3 or 4 sheets at a time. So I can make the cards relatively quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. John McCarthy.
Yes, so I'm wondering, in the game, it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for explanation. The students speak or they write a sample email on the board. What is the format of the final exam?
So the final exam has some situations. For example, the situation where an employee says to another employee, I have an idea for a new product, and then gives like a terrible idea. And so one of the things that we cover in the class is it's the L like concern and suggestion, where the student has to say, I like your idea, but I'm concerned that it's really expensive. So how about this? So the situation card will have something very similar, where they have an employee gives a kind of a not so great idea. You need to be able to disagree with it politely and use these phrases or use these stems in your answer. Similarly, with the email, the students will get an email, like we'll have on the exam, there'll be like a mock email saying like, oh, we apologize. We tried to fulfill your order, but we're out of stock. And then, gives like some dates and times. And then the student has to choose like A, B, C, or D, which of these is the most likely going to happen next, and based on the content of the email, and make inferences. So that will be, an email prompt on the situation card, something very similar to that effect.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course. Nadia.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. That was really good. I'm already thinking how to use it in my academic English class.
Thank you.
So, but one of your slides, I think, said that the setup takes usually up to 10 minutes.
Sorry, can you
Right?
repeat that again?
Yeah, so one of your slides said that to set up the game, you usually take about 10 minutes, right?
Yes.
So I wonder, is it this game, is it a one-off event, or do you?
Yes. So it takes me about 10 minutes. The very first time I play this game is at week 7. So after about 6 weeks of instruction, we do kind of like a checkpoint. And so everything we've covered to that point is on I give situation cards for that content. And then I set up the game by distributing materials and explaining the rules. And I show that slide that has the rules and the types of situations. And that can take up to 10 minutes, depending on the class and depending on the number of students. But after week 15, so the second time we do it at the end of the semester, when we do a full review for the final exam, it takes less time because the students are familiar with the activity. So I did this activity twice in the past fall semester.
Cool. And I have another question, if you don't mind. What's the level of your students? Like, what's the English level?
So my students ranged from like right around Cepher A2 going into B1. And that is based on not just their like speaking, but also like their reading and their writing. So the students have kind of a cross range of levels. And some of the students, for example, I'll get a mixed group of students where some of them are really good at speaking, but their writing is a bit weak. And some of them, the writing is really good, but their speaking is needs a little bit more time. So for overall, I would say most of my students were right around B1, like breaking into B1 from B2. But I had a few lower levels and a few higher levels. Sorry, what did you say?
So it's kind of like a mixed level class, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, cool. I have a similar situation.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. Thank you. I see James Dunn. You have your hand raised as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the levels. So I'll just change my question to a comment. How's that?
Sure.
Love what you've done. Looks really, really cool. As a fellow kind of like game making person, I really enjoyed this. So thank you so much for sharing it today.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I also see in the chat, I have some questions from Alex. Okay. How easy did you find it to set up the mail merge with Excel? And do you use mail merge with other classroom management activities? So I'll answer the first question. I found it actually pretty easy to set up the mail merge with Excel because I've done something like this similarly before. Victoria, I think you were there for my JOLT presentation in Scuba. Yeah, when I did the function card game. So I used a very similar setup, where I have all of the Excel, all of the data, all of the content for the game cards in an Excel spreadsheet. And then I just link it to, I open up a document, Word document, and I link all of the locations that I want the content to go into, like a set of block tables. And then I run a mail merge, check to see if it's the format that I like. And then I do like a print preview and see if it looks good. I print one page. Does it line up front and back? And then if it looks okay, then I do a full print set and then cut on use the paper cutter. We have like one of those big industrial, like armed, like guillotines, I guess they're called, paper cutters. And do I use, yes, that basically answers, like maybe that answers the second question. I've used it with other classroom games, but classroom management activities, as far as like, grouping and things like that, I don't think I've used mail merge in that aspect. Just in game and materials creation. Okay. And
Hello. I just wanted to make a follow-on point.
yes.
Yeah, I used it a lot, and I've made students their own business card
Yes.
using mail merge and just printing out business cards, and that went down incredibly well.
Okay.
And yeah, so I've done that with high school, junior high, and elementary. I haven't done it with university yet, but I'm doing something like that this year, and I'm going to be using a mail merge. And the mail merge is also really good for seating plans if you're changing a seating plan, etc. So yeah, if people haven't learnt how to use mail merge, it works really reliably. You can do it inside Word with tables, but also Excel and merge, and you can have thousands of people or records or whatever. But yeah, really nice use of the game, and nice for that game, and sort of the templates, etc.
Oh, I love that. I love the business card idea, since it's like for the business English course that we're teaching. That would be a really nice way to kind of tie all of that in.
If you gave them a like a Google form or a Word form, and you got them to type in like, you could give them like a drop down menu for hobbies or clubs or whatever. And again, to do a drop down menu is easy because you can Excel. You just drop in the content, copy the column, paste it into the form, and you get a drop down option menu. And then you could literally just generate them a business card, and they can go through real life business card exchanging, but in English. And so they do the data input. All you have to do is to copy the column, paste it, and merge it, and that should work quite well.
That's brilliant. I love that idea. I'm definitely going to steal that for my next round of classes. Thank you, Alex. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions so far about this activity? So I have until 3:55. I realized that I flew through this. Oh, never mind. Just kidding. John Carl, yes.
I'm just curious as if you're going to use this template in the future for like the coming semester, do you think you'd make any changes to the format or to the structure, or just change the questions?
That's a good question. I would probably change a little bit of the format. For example, the email cards, I wasn't so satisfied with because of the size of the print, and maybe the layout of the cards. I'd probably try to redistribute the spacing a little bit. To be honest, like I threw this activity together really quickly, in kind of a hurry. And so I was just like, type this in. Okay, do a mail merge. Oh, okay, this looks good. Okay, and then like literally I'm cutting the cards 10 minutes before class and then trying to shuffle them together and rubber band them up and counting to make sure I have enough and teacher panic. But even in spite of all that, it went really well. I think if I can take my time a little bit more and kind of look at the layout and kind of figure out how to space things apart a little more clearly for the cards, I would like to do that. Or maybe add some different images or different content onto the cards as well. So it's definitely still in progress.
Yeah, I wonder if you can get some feedback from the students. Maybe the students could write up some scenarios.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I like that as well. I tried to pull a lot of the scenarios from the book that we used, as well as the final exam. I did take a look at some of the questions, and I just kind of used that as an inspirational guide to rewrite or to write a lot of the situations that were not exactly the same, but maybe a couple of degrees of similarity, so that the students would have some exposure to what they would be expected to do for the test, without giving away the test, of course. But yeah, that's a really good point. I like getting the ideas from students so that they can have even more investment into the project and the creation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I have until about 3:55, so we could do a brainstorming on ways to, kind of enhance the game, or discussions or other ideas of games that you might have, or other materials that you might have, or any questions about using mail merge or using Microsoft or the other tools that you can use that we have to make creations, or to make materials. We can make breakout rooms. Victoria, you said that we can make, oh, sorry. That's a good idea, getting students to cut out the cards. Yes, I do like that, Alex. Kind of, I wouldn't say outsource, but to make that a little bit faster. So if you have ideas for other games or things that you've tried in the past, or games that have worked, or games that you'd like to possibly test in the future, type in the chat, or unmute yourself and let us know. And we can kind of share and kind of get some ideas growing from the discussion.
Hey, I think everyone is back. So we have about 4 or 5 more minutes to do a recap, and then we'll have a 5-minute break.
Okay, I can start with our group. So we basically talked a little bit about how mail merge, we kind of went over more details of mail merge. I think, was it Paul? Talked a little bit about Google Docs version as well, called, is it Autocrat? There's a Google Docs version as well, but I'm not entirely familiar with it. But it has a similar feature. We talked about that we use it, yes, exactly. So we use mail merge for things like bulk email, letters, labels, emailing large client lists. But there's using it this way, you can also make game cards. If you're teaching kids as well, it's a really fast way to make taking activities from like a workbook, or from, taking drill activities and turning that into something that you can use. And we also talked a little bit about how universities and other institutions use it for things like report cards and or student report, progress reports, and that sort of thing.
Room one, we kind of have a theoretical discussion on the use of physical dice versus digital dice, and if physical dice was actually part and parcel with the game itself, So I've done, a couple of us in the group had done games in the classroom before, and we kind of decided, like, physical dice is where we would like to keep them away from the screens, maybe. But it was an interesting discussion.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If they use their screens already most of the day, having them look at it for the dice might not always be the best option, especially if like they get a notification from Instagram or Line, and then they click over and then they're now disengaged. And then you have to get them back on track. That can be a little bit tricky. Yeah, the Hyakuin shops here, the OneCoin shops here, you can buy dice really cheaply, if that's an option for you. And then they have like little spinners you can make. For like, if you teach I know some eikaiwas and some kids' lessons, they have like little game spinners and things like that, which are fun as well. So those are an option. If dice are, if you're in a pinch and you're like, oh no, I forgot something. Oh no, I don't have it. The dice app comes in handy. But if you want to keep them off the screens, definitely in getting a couple. And you don't need, if you only, like I had 5 groups of 3. So yeah, total of 15 students, 5 groups of 3. I had 5 dice and that worked out pretty well.
All right, if no one else has comments to share, I'm gonna pause the recording for our break, and we will return at 4 o'clock for our second presentation. All right, so now we're going to hear from James Dunn.
All right, thank you so
Recording has
much.
started.
All right, well, first off, thanks for having me today and having the CT SIG to help along with this event. So really, really happy to be here and happy to share some ideas with critical thinking. I kind of wish I was talking about my game stuff too and keeping the topic going along from the first presentation, but going to change gears a little bit and talk about supplemental printouts. And at the end of this presentation, I hope to give you some ways to get them ready for digital consumption as well, not just printing them out on paper. So we're going to be talking about a few things today. Oops, there we go. We're going to start off with higher order thinking skills and lower order thinking skills, better known as Bloom's Taxonomy Revised Edition, and how you can use these. I mean, I'm quite positive many of you are familiar with this, but I won't spend too much time on it. But when you think about critical thinking, higher order thinking skills kind of are the foundation of where critical thinking comes from. You need to utilize higher order thinking skills in order to do critical thinking. So looking at the Bloom's Taxonomy Revised here and the verbs that you can kind of equate to different ways of getting students to use information in their minds, we can see that we have on the left side the lower order thinking skills, on the right side the higher order thinking skills. The higher order thinking skills are the ones that will expand cognition for these students and get them to manipulate and use the information that has been put into their head. And we're going to be looking at this from a textbook standpoint later on. Looking at some of the verbs on the right, for analyzing, you have things like linking, mashing, mind mapping. Evaluating, you have defending your argument, debating. Creating, of course, is blogging, filming, writing, all the things, the productive things that we do in classes. So if you want to start applying higher order thinking skills to your classroom, you can kind of start with the question of, what do you want your students to do? Do I want my students to create a new product? If we're going back to the business example of the previous presentation, well, then you can start picking verbs to help you create your curriculum. For example, assemble, construct, create, design, develop, formulate, and write. Once you've decided what skills you want your students to have, then you can just go ahead and start making the activities, which we'll look at later today. Also try to identify the lower order thinking skills as well, because you might find that sometimes something is missed in a textbook. But if you don't have the lower order thinking skills represented in the textbook, you have to get the information in there first in order to use higher order thinking skills to manipulate that information. And finally, again, I'm rushing through this real quick because there's a lot to get through. But what is critical thinking and language learning? For me, it starts off with questions. I want my students to ask good questions, not just superficial questions or shallow questions, but questions that get them to think a little bit more deeply about a topic. I want them digging deeper into a subject. I want them to be able to think for themselves using problem solving, getting their own information through research. I want them to avoid logical fallacies and cognitive biases, so they know that when they give their opinion and the reasoning behind that opinion to someone, that they know it's a good opinion. And I want them to be a bit more metacognitive or reflective in their thinking, so they can start realizing their own biases. And if need be, adjust your views and having the independence to do so. That, to me, kind of encompasses all I want my students to do when it comes to critical thinking. So to kind of smash all that together and give you a definition of critical thinking that I use in my classrooms, I'll just read it right here. It says, the ability to think clearly and rationally about what to do or what to believe, which includes the ability to perform reflective and independent thinking. So if we go back to the list here a second ago, we know that thinking clearly represents asking good questions and digging deeper into a subject. Thinking rationally, of course, is avoiding faults in your logic and defending your opinions. Reflective thinking is realizing your own biases and adjusting your views. And then independent thinking, finding your own information and problem solving, as well as adjusting your views as well. So how can we apply that to a textbook? And why should we apply it to a textbook? So I want my students to realize that the textbook is not always right. It's okay to question sources of information or authorities on information. Textbooks are not perfect. I have yet to find a perfect textbook that has all my needs covered. So of course, I really enjoy making my own supplemental prints. Students in your classroom, they'll have different needs. I work in the law department at Mage University. So if you work in the business department, my students are going to have a little bit different needs than yours. Textbook can't always accommodate all those needs. Going beyond the textbook can help us customize the student experience and give them new vocabulary or connected topics that are connected to the textbook. And of course, utilize critical thinking to create supplemental prints for the students to tailor to their needs, meaning you're going to think critically about the textbook and then decide on how to supplement it, filling in gaps for thinking skills or knowledge information. So I'm going to use an example of a very popular textbook, I believe, from Cambridge University Press. And we're going to look at it from a couple of viewpoints. One, what higher order thinking skills are they implementing in the textbook? Are they integrating any critical thinking skills in the unit? What kind of actions is it asking the students to do throughout the unit? And then what kind of knowledge is being presented to the students throughout the unit? And I want to design a supplement that expands the higher order thinking skills, either exposes to or deepens the critical thinking skills utilized, and dives deeper into the theme while expanding vocabulary. This is an example from a print I made with my team at Tokai University before I started working at Meiji University. This is an example for my first year, kind of a intermediate level class. You can see there is Japanese translation there for the students to make sure they're all on the same page. But this was a printout to supplement a unit on traveling. The unit was lacking in high order thinking skills, such as ranking, justifying, and supporting your opinion. So we decided to include other higher order thinking skills for students to kind of accompany what was in the textbook. So we added ranking. As you can see here, Yuki from Japan is getting lost. Natan from Thailand, he was feeling like an outsider. Jongha from Korea, homesickness. Which one of these is the most serious problem? Rank them down to the least serious problem. Just get them to do something, a higher order thinking skill that they did not use in the textbook. And then one sentence down below to justify their ranking and strengthen their opinion with justification. Moving further down, you could see after that, we asked the students to give multi-step solutions to problems. So problem solving. Get them to think of solutions to help 2 of the students that they ranked above. And then they could share those ideas with their classmates. They could revise them if they needed to. And then for homework, they would write a short paragraph describing what would happen if they studied abroad, what is a problem they might have, and what steps would you take to solve it. So how did we get to this point? I can show you many, many finished prints, but I think it's more valuable to, what's the old saying? Teach a person how to fish, they'll never go hungry, right? So I want to teach you how to fish with this, this figure right here. You may have seen this before. It's used quite a lot in education. It's a graph by Rex here of Iowa State University. He made it for engineering students. But it's a fantastic tool to give you a lens to look at your textbook to see if there are any deficiencies in a unit. On the left side, we have the knowledge dimension, which is facts, concepts, procedural information, like how to do things, and then metacognitive, more reflective types of information. On the right side, we have cognitive process dimension, which is basically Bloom's revised taxonomy. Remember, understand, apply, being the lower order thinking skills, analyze, evaluate, and create, being the higher order thinking skills. But what's really cool is in the middle where they meet. So if you're thinking about remembering facts, well, yeah, you can just make a list for the student to memorize. But if you want them to analyze a concept, you might want them to differentiate some things. Now, the verbs in the middle are not the only verbs that you could use. a little bit of imagination and going back to that list of verbs with the Bloom's taxonomy, you can come up with a lot of ways to create either prints or activities that your students can use to utilize both the knowledge dimension and the cognitive dimensions. Here's a larger picture of it. So we can think of the learning objectives with the verbs as what students should do to engage a skill. And the knowledge dimension on the left is what they're being asked to gain information-wise while they're doing the unit of a textbook. So when we look at the textbook, we can start to map things out, as it were. We're going to do that with Unlock. You may be familiar with this textbook. It's a good textbook. I've used it at a couple places, a couple of different universities. I've never had a lot of bad things to say about it. Is it perfect? Heck no, not even close, which is why I think I'd like to use a popular book like Unlock to show how I would supplement a unit. This is book number 1, level 1, which is one of the lowest levels. And it is the reading and writing and critical thinking book, which I think there's a different one, also the listening and speaking critical thinking book. We're going to be looking at different sections throughout the unit, which is the learning objectives, keywords from the reading 1 and reading 2. Excuse me. The language development sections and the grammar sections, the critical thinking section, because this book does include a critical thinking section, and the activities that they expect the students to do throughout the unit. From the very first couple of pages, you can start to see that learning objectives, you will watch and understand people who catch fish in different countries, collecting information using nouns and verbs, subject pronouns. Okay, so maybe talking about people, their jobs, maybe describing people. That's the knowledge that we're looking at. I have a better picture of that looking at the reading passages in the unit. We have a very tall man and a my profile for a friend file. Okay, so we're describing other people now, not myself, using adjectives. All right, so they're asking the student to get information how to describe other people and understand those words. Great, all right. Moving on to the language development section, we can start to fill out our verbs and our knowledge dimensions. So we have describing people, others, adjectives, jobs, and now they're talking about family members, grandmother, father, son, sister, aunt. Now, understand, and now you're applying information. On the right side, looking at the grammar, so the verb be, subject pronouns, writing simple sentences. Sultan is from Turkey. His life is not easy. So again, describing people, others, adjectives, jobs, family tree, and maybe talking about home from some of the examples in the activity. And down below the cognitive dimension, we're looking at understanding, applying, and analyzing. So that's basically a unit in Unlock. Again, very good book, but we have describing people, others, all right. Adjectives, great. Jobs, family, and home. That's pretty standard information that a textbook would give students. Cognitive dimension, understand, analyze, and apply. So how familiar are you with higher order thinking skills and lower order thinking skills? How many higher order thinking skills are represented here? Not very many, unfortunately. If we look at the dimensions and the processes that we identified in the textbook, we can start to map them out kind of like this. And we have understanding facts, understanding concepts with the family, the adjectives and things like that. Applying that information to your family and talking about others, and then analyzing family members and their jobs, like he is happy, he is not happy, and things like that. It leaves a lot to be desired in my eyes when it comes to higher order thinking skills and kind of our reflective thinking or things like that. So you could supplement it in a couple of different ways. You could maybe go up this way using evaluate the concepts, the procedures, and the metacognitive factors of it. You could categorize family members by a metric, say age, gender, job, whatever. We could go into other areas looking at ranking students or family members or friends on a spectrum, like the nicest person to the least nicest person. That might be a bit dangerous though. But honestly, the sky's the limit. I mean, there's no question you can branch out from that covered part in the unit to start looking at how to supplement that unit. So what I decided on was knowing yourself. So moving into the metacognitive. side, the reflective side of the knowledge. And then evaluating and categorizing something that was not utilized in the text. How we added it? Well, we started looking at your personality and describing your personality. So changing the focus from outside to inside. And then the cognitive dimension, we're analyzing, categorizing, and then justifying your opinions. And this is what we made. This is, excuse me, again, for a basic level class. So the instructions are in Japanese, again, just to make sure all the students know exactly what to do. But a lot of the keywords come from the unit, from Unlock. So, give you a better look at it. We start off very simply. My favorite something is something. I love baseball because it's fun. I hate natto because it's stringy or something. Anything is okay. The only thing we're trying to do here is getting the student to shift their focus from the outside, describing others, to focusing on themselves. Moving down the printout, it looks like, what kind of personality do you have? Describe yourself using at least one adjective. So again, they can use some of the vocabulary from the textbook, but make sure that they justify with the because I. Example, I think I am a hardworking person because I study hard every day. Yeah, great, they'll be fine. Moving down along, we added something new. So this was not covered in the unit of the textbook, meaning that we wanted to add new keywords, new ideas, and new topics that were connected heavily back to the unit. So we gave them 3 types of personalities. If when they're reading these, like the leader, the analyst, and the communicator, if they needed to use a dictionary, we encourage that, because a lot of the vocabulary does come from the unit that we put into this, but some of it does not, and it's new, and it's introduced that we chose to introduce it. So we want them to feel free to use a dictionary as they do this, because we do know it's new information sometimes. So they read this, they record any difficult words that they did not know on there using the dictionary, and then they have to choose. All right, are you a leader? Are you an analyzer? Are you a communicator? And tell us why you think so. So basically, we turn their perception to themselves. We give them new information for the personality, and then we have them apply that new information to themselves and categorizing themselves into one of these 3 personality types. And of course, justifying, please tell us why, an example, why you think you're that way. The example we gave, I was the soccer team captain at my school. I always trained hard and never gave up. Therefore, they think they are the leader type. Now, I added something toward the end, which I thought was kind of funny at the time, but I didn't know how interesting it was going to be when I put it onto this, like the last little part of space at the bottom of the paper. Write about which of the 3 personality types you do not want to be like. So we're just flipping that last question around and say, okay, which one are you? Which one would you not like to be? Strangely enough, I had quite a few students have the same answer for the first question and the second question. They might choose, oh, I'm a leader because all my friends ask me to help them. Which one do you not want to be like? I don't want to be a leader because my friends are asking me too much to do, or something like that. So it was a really kind of an interesting little insight into the students that sometimes what they are matched with what they did not want to be like. So looking at this kind of printout, this was made for paper. We printed it out and gave it to students for the reading and writing classes at that university. It's a print that I still use today when I use Unlock books. But I don't know about you, I went through 3.5 years of online classes. So I had to learn how to change something I was always just printing out. How could I make it more interactive with, say, online classes through an LMS, or at Meiji, we call it OO Meiji. It's a strange name. But I'd like to switch my screen share real quick and show you how I made this one. This is something I made for my Meiji classes last year, ecological disasters and our local actions. But you can see there's a bunch of red spots on here. It says click or tap to enter the text here. Choose an item. Student numbered. Click or tap here to enter text. It's kind of like a quiz, but it's an activity, and they can do it on their computer, or they can do it on their iPad. All right, so if you give me 1 second, I need to switch over to Word, because originally I was going to do this on Adobe Acrobat, but I started to realize that not everybody has Adobe Acrobat, and it's quite an expensive piece of software. So I learned how to do this on Word, and I'd like to share that with you. All right. Just out of curiosity, has anyone done this type of like drop-down lists in your PDFs and things before? It's really quite useful. I need to get out of this real quick. So I'm going to like show you how the bacon's made. When you customize your ribbon. All right. So when you open up Word for the first time, you're probably going to see something like this. Up here, you have home, insert, design, layout, references, mailings, review, all that kind of stuff. There's no way to automatically just start putting in drop-down boxes into your document without going in here to customize the ribbon. So this means you'll need to add something to this part up here. So we're going to customize the ribbon and click on developer. Now, this is being recorded. So if you need to come back to it, please do. Developer will give you the options to add drop-down boxes and text boxes. So now that I clicked developer in the customized ribbon, you can see up here, I have developer. All right. So basically what this does, it gives me an easy way to format and get information exactly where I want it to be. And by choosing the vocabulary that I put into the drop-down boxes, I can introduce similar vocabulary that students should know and be able to connect to the vocabulary in the textbook or the original text. This for me, of course, is just their name. They would have to choose which class they're in, let's say Tuesday, third period class, and then their student number. I changed the color on these because it's easier for me to, when I do my attendance or my participation points, when they turn these things in, it's just easier for me to see. You could be black, it could be yellow, it could be red. It's really up to you. All right, how would we put in a blank here? Originally, it was providing here. So for the past 30 years, Small Grant Program, SGP, has been providing financial and technical support to civil organizations and community-based organizations on innovative, community-driven, blah, 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 blah. I want to give my students not providing, but another word that I want them to connect that with. So I would go up to here, which is a drop-down list. There's two, combo box and drop-down list. Drop-down list is the simple version, meaning what you put in here, the students cannot change. They have to choose one of your choices. How do you add choices? You have it selected, go up to properties, and then you can add your choices. Just down here, add, display name. Let's say stealing, incorrect answer. Add, giving. Okay, providing, giving. I want them to make those connections. And one more, let's say returning. So two wrong answers. We have a negative, we have a positive, we have a neutral. I want my students to choose one of those. No. Okay. So that's how I would add a vocabulary word that should be connected to something they already know from the previous reading or activities, and making sure that they can make those connections in their brain. Do the same thing here, but let me show you the combo box. Combo box looks exactly the same. You can add choices, A, B, C. Oops, didn't get the C. C. But the cool thing about this one, the combo box, is if the student doesn't like a choice, they can write their own, actually. Write their own answer. It's a little bit different. You have the choices, only my choices that I give them, or they can write their own choices down here. So for me, I like to get these a different color so they're easy to find. Something I like to do is use a different color for my answers, so it's easy for me to pick out, like that. Yeah. And I'm going through this very quickly, but I don't want to use up too much time today. No. All right. Down below, to choose 4 of the key vocabulary from today's lesson, they would have a printout in this would be their homework. I gave them a printout earlier that had a box with vocabulary on it they had to go through. They need to come up with their own project. So I want them to choose 4 of the key vocabulary that we went over in the classroom, and then focus their project on those 4 keywords. Once they've chosen a couple keywords, I maybe want to give them like some free space over here. I use a text here, and they can just write anything they want here. That's fine. Or if I want to focus, I could give them a drop-down box and say, no, please choose from these. It gives you kind of an extra layer of control, as it were. And that if you want them to choose from a focus their idea on a certain project that you hope to see, you can restrict what they choose. But if you want them to be a bit more free, you can write a text box and you know exactly where it's going to come up because they won't be able to change it. You'll know it's always going to be right here. I don't know about you, but sometimes my students have a difficult time figuring out where name and student number go. So you can imagine how messy it gets down here sometimes. Getting them to focus a little bit better on these is good for my peace of mind, as it were. And I know that I can kind of tailor it to how I want them to either do their project or how much freedom I want to give them. Down below, we have up here, plain text content control. This is, for me, I like to be able to have that there. They can click on it. They can write their answer. If a student is savvy with Word, this actually isn't that necessary because you can actually click inside the box. But again, if you want to start adding those drop-down boxes inside these sentences, you could do that as well. For example, skeleton sentences or stems that you want them to use. Okay. And do the same thing down here. And I'd like that to be a different color. Say it's nice blue color. And when they write their answer, it's easy for me to see. As you can see, I'm not a very good typer. Okay. So this is how basically I would go through and get my students to focus on what I want them to focus on. Which parts of the reading do I think is the most important? Should they be thinking the most deeply on? Which part do I want them to use their own ideas on? So for example, if I want them to write their own ideas, I could take this out and just add a big space, and they can enter their text here. So to me, I like this because it gives me an additional kind of layer of control, as it were. I can do various different ideas when it comes to adding new vocabulary, changing the topic a little bit. This is not exactly from the textbook or the original text, rather. This was adapted and evolved to kind of add vocabulary, add thinking skills, get them to look up words, all that kind of good stuff. And really just supplement the textbook is what we're doing today. So, all right. Sorry, I have not been looking at chat. If there's questions, I'm sorry. No, okay, good. All right, so let me jump back. Actually, let me stop right here real quick. And are there any questions about how to use Word to do the drop-down choices? Any questions? I don't want to jump off this if someone has a question.
I'm getting some feedback that this is new for a lot of people, so why
Okay.
don't we do like a 5-minute breakout room and then come back with questions, because I think everyone will have some. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. If you have any questions, please ask James. Any groups want to share?
Everybody's perfect. That's awesome.
If you think of one, you can send one in the chat too.
Yeah,
Can I ask a
in
question?
your group,
Yeah, go for it.
someone mentioned that we could use QR code.
Yeah, you could input a QR code for, say, like an online database or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit above my ability, I think, for like, I know how to make QR codes, but getting it into an online database that's searchable for me, I'm not sure if my school's LMS does that. But something to think about, though. Thank you.
Right. Sure. Thank you.
Lee? Yeah, McDowell?
Thanks, James.
Yeah.
You may have mentioned, but I wanted to confirm with you. So when you create the drop-down menus in the Word document, and then you would probably export it as a PDF, and then it comes out in the PDF. Is that it? Or are you
The
sharing
PDF will
that
not
amongst-
keep that. I would send the Word document.
I see. I got it. Thanks.
Yeah. If you convert this or export as a PDF, this will lose all of the scripting inside. Which for me, I mean, all my students automatically have Word anyway. I prefer PDFs. I've been a PDF person for a long time. And if you do this in Acrobat, you have to have the paid version of Adobe Acrobat.
Yeah.
The free version, you cannot do this, unfortunately, which is why I switched to Word. But if you were to do this in Word, you'd have to send the Word document to the student.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah. Great question, though. Thank you. Yeah, the one for Adobe Acrobat would be a workshop for another time, I think, because that's not a whole lot of people have that. Victoria?
I was just gonna follow up with a quick comment that one of my colleagues does this, and she also protects the document. So if you want to learn more about how to do that, yeah.
I'll give you a really quick example right now. So we've got time. When you make, say, a drop-down list, you go to properties, you can see in the properties, content control cannot be deleted. Content cannot be edited. So if I want to make sure the student doesn't accidentally delete that drop-down box, because they could if they accidentally, select it all and hit delete. Let's do A, B, C. Oops. Okay. And again, I like to change the style of these just to make it more easily findable for me when I grade the papers and things. Maybe not red. Let's do dark blue, because I just learned that red is difficult for colorblind students. Thank you, Alex. So the students can see, like, choose an item here. They have to do the A, B, or C, but when I do the A, it's blue, so it's much easier for me to like focus on where to check their answers. But since I protected it from being deleted, there's no way to delete. You can't hear me like tapping the delete button on my keyboard, but you can't delete this so the student can't accidentally miss it. You can also go in and restrict editing up here, which is something I haven't played with, but you're correct that you could protect the whole document and only the blanks can be like edited or added to. So, but that's something I'm still playing with. Todd?
Yeah, something I noticed when I was using Word documents with students is like everybody has like a different version of Word, and there's some differences in formatting between like my English version of Word that I use and the Japanese version they have on their school computers.
Oh, really?
When you use this type of system, do you find any like discrepancies between different versions of Word? Would that cause any trouble with the worksheet?
I have used this 4 times in the fall semester for classes that I had to miss for different meetings and things like that. And I didn't have any strange formatting getting back. All my students got the homework back to me because it was participation and their attendance kind of. It was online class. So they got 100% the homework back and everything looked fine. And I didn't get any complaints from the students. So I know some of them use Macs. I know some of them use PCs. Maybe okay. I don't want to say 100% yes or no, because there could be a case out there that might change up the formatting or whatnot.
Right.
That's
Okay,
a
thank
great
you.
thing to keep in mind, though. That's why
I al-
PDFs are so good, right?
That's why I always use PDFs.
Yeah, I hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Any other questions?
We have one in the
No.
chat.
Oh, one in the chat. Okay, chat. Yes, you can export the. I don't have time to go into it today, but for example, you could allot a value to each one of these answers. So, for example, if you wanted to do, let's say, closest to the meaning, but all of them are kind of close, and you want them to choose the best or the most closest, I guess you could say, to the correct answer, you could assign that like 3 points. The farther one away, 2 points. And then you could export that. But I played with it one time while learning how to do this. I do not feel comfortable trying to teach it to you, though. So just being honest, it is possible to get the data out of there if you assign values, but maybe check YouTube before you ask me. Okay. All right. Let me go back to my presentation real quick, and we'll finish up. Okay. All right. So going back to looking at the making these prints, how we got to the point of making the prints from breaking down a unit to the higher order thinking skills and the knowledge that the textbook is asking the student to gain, using that to create supplemental prints that go beyond the textbook and support it as well as expand upon it, to getting them ready for online consumption, a little bit easier for online consumption, and a little bit of a control on your part to focus their attentions if they need to be. And I think this is brought up in the earlier presentation that the game, if you don't teach business majors, it's easy to think of ways to customize it for your needs. Same with this. I mean, no textbook is going to cover your architecture students as well as you could, but this kind of way of thinking and deconstructing a unit gives you the ability to add architecture to it with those connections between higher order thinking skills and knowledge that's being built upon from the textbook. Living environments, living conditions, personalities, environment. I mean, the list is endless. The amount of supplemental prints that you can make and come up with is just limited by your own imagination, right? That's what's really cool about doing this. And making your own materials, which is great with the Material Writer SIG, that you know that you're doing everything you can for your students. And that's a great feeling to me. So that's why I love making my own supplemental prints, making the games, learning about other games today has been fantastic. So thank you so much for having me here today. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you got something out of this.